Hi, today we're going to look at making rose leaves. If you've seen my previous tutorial, you already have made the flowers and you will have added the calyx. For the rose leaves, we require to have a cell board. Now this can be a board that's two-sided. One side is plain for rolling flat things. The other side is grooved, and this is ideal for making leaves, anything where you need to put a wire in. Now I'm going to show you how to use the cell board to make your leaves, but I'm also going to make a leaf not using the grooves for people who do not have one of these groove boards. Other things we need edible glue and a brush for the edible glue. We also need the cutters. Now the rose leaf cutters are serrated, and there are various different types. There are metal, there are plastic that are hollow, there are plastic with a small hole in the centre that are semi-hollow, and there are also plastic that I've got no hole in the centre and I've got a back on and are quite shallow. Now the ideal ones for working with the grooved board is either the hollow or the semi-hollow cutter, and the rose cutter leaf cutters come in various sizes. Usually you get a pack of 3 different sizes, but if you've only got the one cutter, then that's okay. You can just put the one size of rose leaf together with your roses. I also need to have a rolling pin, and I have my cell stick, but you can use a ball tool, and if you would like you can use a small palette knife or a dinner knife for removing paste. And the other thing that I'm going to use is a veiner. Now a petal veiner or a leaf veiner tends to have the same sort of pattern that you would find on a leaf. Now depending upon what type of leaf you're doing, there is a specific veiner for each type. This leaf veiner that I'm going to use today is a 2-part veiner. It's got a top and it's got a bottom part that are joined by a small bridge of rubber. And this is a universal veiner, meaning that this is the most similar pattern to most of the leaves that you would make in your flower arrangement. Okay. The other thing, I need my good quality flower paste or modelling paste, and I've coloured this gooseberry green. Now if you have seen my previous video, the tutorial for the wired rose, you will see that I've coloured the paste gooseberry green for the calyx, and the leaves are exactly the same shade. Now all leaves are lighter at the bottom than they are at the top, and so for this reason we will do the top colour as dust. We'll dust it up before we put the flowers together. Okay, so I'm going to take a small ball of paste. Now I do also need the flower wires, and for this larger size leaf I could use a 26 gauge wire, or I could use a 24. If I use a wire that is too thin for the purpose, then the leaf will not hold its shape when I try to put it into an arrangement, and it will bend. If I use a wire that is too thick, so for the size of the cutter, then I won't be able to arrange it as well, because I won't be able to move it very well within the arrangement. So it's important that you have the right size wire for the leaf that you're going to do. So for this large size leaf, I'm going to use a 24 wire, but I could use a 26, but I wouldn't use anything thicker than a 24. I'm going to make a ball of paste. I'm going to try and make it crack free. I'm going to roll it onto the centre of my hand, into the palm of my hand, and I'm going to then roll my two hands together to make a sausage shape. Now ideally this needs to be roughly the same size as the cutter. I'm then going to put it into one of my grooved areas. Now the board should have been prepared with a small amount of shortening or white fat, and this prevents sticking. And then I'm going to start rolling my paste out. Now, as with petals, the paste needs to be really thin, and it needs to be wide enough to take the cutter. Okay. I'm then going to turn it over onto my board, and as you can see that I've got the groove that is going to take the wire. I then take my cutter and I place the base of the cutter to the base of the groove, the thicker part of the groove on the paste. Okay, and I'm going to remove the excess paste. Now I can do this while the cutter is in place, or I can remove the cutter and then take the excess paste away. And then I'm going to roll that up and put it back under my container. I'm then going to take my sponge pad, and if you watched the tutorial for the rose petals, you will have seen that we use the sponge pad for balling and thinning. You cannot do this on a hard surface or you will tear the paste. It has to be on foam that's semi-hard, okay? Not too firm, but then again not too soft, because if it's too soft, then when you're trying to thin it and ball it, it will just, your implement that you're using, your cell stick or your ball tool, will just dip into the sponge and will hinder you in creating the shape. Okay, I'm just lightly balling round the edge, not too much because I don't want to take the effect of the serrated edge off. And because I'm not going to use all the groove, I can, with the end of my cell stick or my ball tool, I can just remove a small amount of that groove. And what that does, that allows me to make the petal, or rather the leaf, a little bit larger. I'm then going to take my wire. Okay, so I've already cut my 24 wires. I've cut them into 3, each wire into 3. That gives me an ideal length. Okay, I'm dipping it into my glue, just the tip, and then I'm going to place the wire into the groove. Now I'm only taking that in 1 to 3 centimeters, okay, into the paste. I'm then going to pinch it slightly near the base to anchor it to the wire, and then I'm going to take my veiner and put the veined pattern onto the leaf. Now I don't want to vein on the pad because it's too soft. If I use my veiners on the pad, then I'm not going to get the ultimate amount of pressure, and so the veining pattern isn't going to be as great. So I need to put my pad to one side. I need to take my cutter, or rather take my veiner, and if you look at the veiner, you'll notice that one side has got an indent and the other side is raised. So we're going to put the wire in the groove on the indented side, and then we're going to place the veiner on top, and then I'm going to press. Now try not to put too much pressure where you know the wire is, or otherwise you may find that the wire will break through the paste. And then I'm going to take that down, okay? And so now I've got my leaf in my veiner, okay? And it's got its vein on. Now if I was to pull that up by the wire would just come out. So I do need to be careful here. I need to gently get hold of the wire and just balance the edge of the leaf onto my finger and then place it back onto my cell pad. Now because the wire is only in a short way, I need to support the leaf while it dries. So I cannot stand it up immediately, or otherwise it will just fall back on the wire, and even the wire could break through the paste. And so at this stage I'm going to shape it slightly using my fingers. And if you watch the rose petal tutorial, you will have seen that I will have done the same with the edge of the petals that I'm doing with this leaf. Because if you look at leaves, if you go outside and you look at leaves, they're not totally flat. They do have some shape and some movement. And because we're trying to make something that looks realistic, then we need to create that movement. So just a little bit of shape into them and then leave it to dry. Now it only needs to dry for about 1 minute. And after that time you should be able to stand it up. It's just although it won't be completely dry, it will be enough that the paste will not fall back, that it will be rigid. These I did about 5 minutes ago, and as you can see they're quite sturdy now, okay, and they will stand up on the wire. There's no movement in them. Now what I need to do now is ideally to leave them to dry, and as with the rose flower, ideally they need to be left to dry for a minimum of 12 hours. This allows for the paste to fully dry so that when we dust the additional colour onto them, it doesn't bleed, and when we put them together that we've less chance of having damage. Now before I do that, because obviously I've got to leave these two set for a while, so in part 2 I will be showing you how I dust them, and also how I attach them to each other, and how we put them with the rose flowers, how we complete those, how we steam them and how we glaze them. But just before I do that, I'm just going to show you how to make a leaf without using a grooved board. So I still need to take a small amount of paste. I'm going to go for the sausage shape because I want it similar to my cutter. Okay. And I'm going to just start rolling it out. And then I'm going to take my cell stick, or I could use a small rolling pin, and I'm going to roll out the sides from the centre, but I'm going to leave a small ridge at the base. Now the ridge doesn't need to be very thick, it just needs to be thick enough to be able to take the wire. If it's too thick, then your leaf is going to look bulky. So I'm rolling out the rest of the paste really thinly, okay, and then, but I'm just leaving that amount of thickness. Now obviously, you know, the bigger the leaf, the longer the groove that you can create, or the raised area. But it's important that your leaf paste is quite thin, apart from this raised area that you've made. Okay, so if you see that, you can see that I've got this raised area. Then put the cutter over it, so I'm putting the base of the cutter to the bottom of the raised area, and then I'm going to remove the excess. Okay, so I could just take the cutter away and remove the excess, or I can remove it while the cutter's in place. So because I did it the other way with the last leaf, I will do it this way with this one. And take my excess and put it under my pot. And if there's a bit that still needs to be taken away, I can do that at this stage. Okay. And now I've got my leaf cut out that's got my grooved area on the back. I'm going to place it onto my board, and I'm going to do exactly the same. If I want to slightly thin it on the edge, I can do, but I don't want to do this too much, or it takes away the serrated edge of the leaf. And then I'm going to dip my wire, just the end of it, just the tip of it, into my edible glue. That's going to go into my raised area. Okay, and you do see people picking the leaves up and pushing the wire in, but you're more likely for the wire to come out if you do it that way. It's much easier to leave it lying flat while you insert the wire. Okay, make sure that you anchor it on the end, and then I'm going to take my veiner. Remember to put your veiner on a firm surface. The indented part of the veiner is, I'm going to put the channel that we've created for the wire into that indent, and then I'm going to put the top of the veiner on, and I'm going to press it where I know there's no wire, because I don't want the wire to come through. So I'll give it a good press. Okay, and you take it off, take my pad and place it down. Okay, you can see the wire hasn't come through on the other side. And if I want to make a little bit of a shape, I can do it with my fingers, or I could do it with my cell stick or the edge of a paintbrush, just so that the leaf isn't totally flat. And then I leave that to one side to dry for about a minute, and then I'll be able to stand it up with the others. This is the one I did about a minute ago, 2 minutes ago, and as you can see, it's able to stand up now. Now in part 2, I will show you how we dust the leaves, how we put them together, and how we incorporate them with the flowers, and how it's glazed.